She paid for his coffee when his card was declined. Little did she know he was a billionaire searching for more than just a cup of coffee. He was searching for a heart like hers. The morning rush at Hazelwood Cafe was in full swing. The soft clinking of mugs, the hum of conversation, and the low strum of a guitar from the corner radio blending into the comfortable chaos that made the little shop so beloved. The scent of roasted beans floated through the air, rich and warm, wrapping the place like a hug. Behind the counter, Elsie Wolfe moved like music itself, quick, graceful, every motion carrying quiet joy. She knew half the faces by heart and the rest by order. A double espresso for Mr. Carter in the blue tie, oat milk latte for Miss June from the flower shop, black coffee with a splash of almond milk for the bus driver who stopped by between routes. But what made Elsie special wasn't just her memory or her efficiency, it was the way she saw people. She slipped small handwritten notes under coffee sleeves. "You're doing better than you think," or "Don't forget to breathe today." She never signed them, never expected anyone to notice. It was just her way of giving back to a world that often forgot to smile. The cafe had become her second home, the place where she found meaning after a long day of teaching art to children at the community center. She worked hard, laughed often, and lived within her means, even if those means were modest. Her apron was always dusted with traces of coffee grounds and paint smudges that never seemed to wash out. The bell over the door chimed softly, and a cool gust of November air rolled through. Elsie looked up automatically with her usual bright smile. A man had stepped in, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a plain charcoal jacket and jeans. He carried himself with quiet confidence, but not the kind that demanded attention. His hair was slightly tousled, his face calm, almost thoughtful. There was something about him, a stillness that contrasted with the noise of the cafe. He stood in line like anyone else, scanning the chalkboard menu with mild curiosity. A moment later, he reached the counter, meeting Elsie's gaze with eyes so steady and blue that for a heartbeat she forgot the next customer's order. "Good morning," she said, snapping herself back into motion with a warm grin. "What can I get started for you?" "Good morning," he replied, his voice smooth and low, carrying that quiet assurance of someone used to being listened to. "Just a black coffee, medium roast, and—" He glanced at the pastry case. "Maybe one of those blueberry muffins. They look too good to resist." Elsie chuckled softly as she rang him up. "You chose the right one. Those go fast." He offered a faint, almost shy smile, pulling out his card. For a moment, everything seemed perfectly ordinary, until the card reader blinked red. Elsie frowned lightly, trying again. The same red light, then again. Still nothing. The man's brow furrowed slightly, but he didn't look frustrated. Just quietly embarrassed. "That's strange," he murmured, fishing through his wallet. "It should work. Maybe it's my bank." "It happens all the time," Elsie said quickly, trying to ease his discomfort. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Don't worry about it. This one's on me." He blinked, surprised. "Oh no, I can't let you—" "You can," she interrupted, her smile easy and kind. "It's just a cup of coffee and a muffin. I promise the world won't end over $5. For a long second, he just looked at her, as if trying to understand why someone would bother to be kind for no reason. Then a faint smile touched his lips, the kind that began in the eyes before reaching the mouth. "Thank you," he said softly. "You're very kind." She shrugged, brushing a stray curl from her cheek. "It's what coffee people do. We rescue caffeine emergencies." That made him laugh, quietly, but genuinely, and she found herself smiling even wider. He waited patiently as she poured the coffee, the steam rising in graceful swirls between them. "Here you go," she said, handing him the cup and muffin bag. "Black, no sugar, no judgment." He laughed again, a sound that felt warm, like sunlight finding its way through a window. "I owe you one," he said, his eyes sincere. "You can pay it forward," she replied. "That's my favorite kind of refund." He nodded slowly, as if filing that away like a promise. When he turned to leave, Elsie watched him go without meaning to. Something about the simplicity of the exchange, the honesty, the humanness, felt special. Not in a romantic way, not yet, but in a way that reminded her why she loved what she did. Sometimes kindness was its own kind of art. The day rolled on, regulars came and went, and the clatter of cups became a steady rhythm again. But every so often, Elsie found herself glancing at the door, half expecting the stranger to walk back in. He didn't. When her shift ended, she stayed behind for a while, wiping counters and humming softly to the music still playing. Outside, the Nashville sky was brushed in pink and gold, the first stars peeking through. She sat at her favorite corner table with her sketchbook open. Her fingers, still faintly stained with ink, began to move almost without thought. She drew his face, the calmness in his eyes, the way his mouth had tilted into a grateful half-smile. It wasn't perfect, but it felt real. When she was done, she stared at the page for a long time. Then, with a quiet laugh, she shook her head. "You're officially drawing strangers now, Elsie," she muttered to herself. "That's a new low." But deep down, she knew it wasn't just a stranger she'd drawn. It was a moment. A feeling. Across town, Vance Fletcher sat in his car in the quiet corner of a downtown parking lot. The dashboard clock blinked 8:47 p.m. He had spent the last 12 hours moving through meetings, calls and decisions, all the things that made up the life of a man the world called successful. But right now that life felt oddly distant. He stared at the cup of coffee in his hand, the one she'd paid for. A small paper cup with a faint heart drawn beneath it. Maybe she drew them for everyone. Maybe not. He took a slow sip. The warmth filled him, but it wasn't the coffee that stirred him. It was the simple humanity behind it. It had been years since anyone had done something kind for him, without expecting something in return. His life was a carousel of business deals, events, polite smiles, and people who saw his wealth long before they saw his eyes. But that morning, standing in that cafe, he had been just another man with a declined card. And somehow, that had felt freeing. He thought about her smile, the ease in her voice, the way she brushed off the moment like it was nothing. He couldn't remember the last time a moment had lingered like this. He leaned back in his seat, eyes lifting toward the city skyline, the muted glow of Nashville light stretching out before him. He'd built skyscrapers, funded entire districts. Yet the most meaningful thing that had happened in months cost him absolutely nothing. For the first time in years, he murmured under his breath, "Someone saw me and not my name." The realization sank deep, both humbling and strangely comforting. He sat there for a long time, just thinking, letting the sound of passing cars blend into the background. Then almost unconsciously he smiled. He knew he could never repay her in the way people usually did. Not with money, not with gifts, but maybe, just maybe, he could repay her in the way she'd given, with time, with honesty, with presence. He reached for his phone and pulled up a map of the city, scrolling until he found it, Hazelwood Cafe. He read the name twice, as if committing it to memory. Tomorrow he thought he'd go back. Not as Vance Fletcher, billionaire, not as anyone important, just as a man who wanted to know the kind of woman who could turn a small kindness into something unforgettable. He took one last sip of his coffee, the faint taste of blueberry muffins still on his tongue, and let a quiet laugh escape him. It wasn't the first time someone had seen him embarrassed, but it was the first time it had ever felt like a beginning. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, one by one painting the night in gentle amber glow. The city hummed softly, a lullaby of distant guitar chords, laughter spilling from restaurants. The hum of life moving forward. Vance sat there watching it all. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. The morning sun spilled across Nashville in a soft, golden glow, painting the streets in warmth. The city stirred gently, the hum of early traffic, the occasional bark of a dog, and the distant melody of a street musician tuning his guitar. Hazelwood Cafe, already alive with the scent of freshly ground beans, the hiss of steaming milk, and the quiet chatter of morning regulars seemed ordinary. Except today it wasn't. Behind the counter, Elsie Wolf moved with her usual ease, filling orders, smiling, and slipping tiny encouragement notes under coffee sleeves. She had just set a cappuccino in front of a middle-aged man who always ordered it extra foamy when a bell jingled. Over the door, she glanced up and froze for the briefest heartbeat. He was back, tall, broad-shouldered, eyes calm and thoughtful. The same man whose card had declined yesterday morning. He stood in line like any other customer, casually dressed in a navy pullover and dark jeans. His presence didn't shout wealth or status. It simply felt grounded, familiar, somehow warm. He caught her glance and smiled a little shyly, as if greeting an old friend. "Good morning," he said. Elsie's lips curved into a bright smile and she stepped forward. "Good morning? Back for coffee?" He chuckled softly, his voice smooth and steady. "Yeah, I didn't get a chance to thank you properly yesterday." "No worries," she replied, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. "You survived without your muffin, didn't you?" He laughed, and it was different this time. Softer, more relaxed, like he had shed some invisible weight. "Barely," he said. "I think I need a second chance." She raised an eyebrow, playful. "Lucky for you, I make excellent second chances." As he approached the counter, he introduced himself quietly. "I'm Van," he said, carefully avoiding mention of his full name. There was no attempt to impress her, no grandeur, just the simple truth of wanting to be seen as himself. Elsie nodded, accepting the name with a gentle smile. "Van, huh? I like it." They talked briefly over the order. Black coffee for him, a croissant to start the day, light conversation, small laughter, easy smiles. But underneath, something unspoken hummed quietly, a mutual curiosity, a gentle sense that their connection yesterday had not been a fleeting coincidence. Over the next few days, Van returned regularly, often sitting at the same corner table with a book or sketch pad while Elsie worked behind the counter. Their conversations grew longer, warmer, and richer. He listened as she spoke about her life. The community art classes she taught for kids, the late nights she spent painting small pieces for local exhibitions, her dream of opening a studio someday. She talked freely, without reservation, as though she had found someone safe enough to share herself with. He never interrupted or judged. He asked thoughtful questions, encouraged her ideas, and seemed genuinely fascinated by the world she painted with her words. There was no curiosity about money, no probing into her personal struggles. Only attentiveness, patience, and an appreciation for who she was. And slowly a friendship began to grow. They started walking together along the Cumberland River, the city skyline reflecting in the water as they strolled side by side. Conversations flowed easily, about favorite books, childhood memories, Nashville's hidden gems, and the songs that made them feel alive. They stopped to watch street musicians strum their guitars, sometimes leaving small tips, sometimes just standing silently, letting the music drift around them. On weekends, they explored old bookstores downtown, thumbing through worn pages and laughing at odd book titles. Van would pick up a random volume and hand it to her, saying, "For inspiration," and Elsie would pretend to scold him for the intrusion while secretly enjoying the gesture. The moments were small, everyday things, yet they were extraordinary in their simplicity. Each smile, shared laugh, and casual touch of shoulders as they passed books between them layered comfort, trust and warmth between their hearts. For Vance, these simple outings were a revelation. He had spent years in high-rise offices, negotiating deals, hosting formal dinners, attending events that were more about appearances than substance. Yet here, with Elsie, he found a serenity that money and power had never given him. He could talk without pretense. He could laugh without caution. He could feel genuinely present, not the man who was watched, envied, or desired for his status, but just Van, a man enjoying coffee, conversation, and the rare pleasure of someone noticing him for who he was. And Elsie, she felt it too. Her heart relaxed around him. She no longer felt the subtle need to guard her dreams, her hopes, or her vulnerabilities. He never judged her struggles. He never questioned her choices. He celebrated her victories, no matter how small. Her sketching, her teaching, her quiet acts of kindness. He admired them all. Over time, she realized something she hadn't expected. She liked him. She liked his quiet humor, his calm attentiveness, the way he asked questions that made her think, the way he remembered tiny details she hadn't even noticed herself. But it wasn't a crush, not yet. It was the slow, tender awareness of someone whose presence made the world seem softer, easier. One crisp afternoon, they sat on a bench along the river. leaves swirling in gentle eddies around their feet. The sun was dipping low, spilling golden light across the water, and a soft breeze carried the scent of autumn leaves and distant coffee shops. Elsie had brought her sketch pad, absent-mindedly drawing little vignettes of the scene: a boy skipping stones, a dog chasing leaves, a street musician tuning his guitar. Van watched her, quiet and attentive, letting her focus remain uninterrupted. "You really have a gift," he said at last, his voice low, careful, almost reverent. She smiled without looking up. "Thanks. I just like noticing the little things. Life's easier when you pay attention." He nodded, leaning back slightly on the bench. "I think that's why I keep coming back," he said quietly. "Not just for the coffee, not even for the company, but because being here with you noticing makes the world feel different." She looked up, eyes meeting his. There was a pause, a quiet hum of understanding between them. She didn't know exactly what he meant, but she felt it: warmth, safety, and the odd, fragile thrill of something new yet comforting. Their walks became a ritual, not every day, but often enough that both of them marked the calendar in their minds. Weekends at the farmer's market, early mornings watching the city wake, late afternoons with warm cups of tea while listening to records. Every moment was small and unassuming. Yet the accumulation of these moments began to weave a quiet affection between them, gentle, understated, and patient. There was no rush, no pressure, no grand gestures needed, just consistency, presence, and attentiveness. One evening, as the sunset painted the sky in hues of pink and orange, they walked quietly down the tree-lined streets near her apartment. The world seemed still, almost suspended, as the light softened the edges of the buildings and cast long, warm shadows on the pavement. Van paused, turning toward her. His gaze was soft, thoughtful, almost hesitant. "Elsie," he began, then stopped as if measuring the weight of his words. Finally, he continued, "There's something about you that makes me feel home again." Her breath caught for a moment. A blush warmed her cheeks, though she tried to hide it. She smiled, a little shyly, but there was no hesitation in her eyes. "I'm glad," she said softly, "because you make the world feel easier, too." He nodded, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. Yet there was a depth in his gaze, a quiet sense that he carried untold stories, fragments of a life shaped by experiences she hadn't yet glimpsed. And though she sensed it, she didn't press. She didn't need to. Because right now, in this simple, golden moment, everything felt exactly right. They continued walking side by side, letting the world fade around them. The river, the music, the gentle stir of leaves, all seemed to exist only for them. And for the first time in a long time, both of them felt completely present, completely themselves, completely alive. Days turned into weeks, and their bond deepened naturally, without the interference of outside concerns or complications. They laughed at small mishaps in the cafe, shared quiet breakfasts, explored little corners of the city that held hidden charm. And in these small, honest moments, love began to grow, not loudly or suddenly, but steadily, beautifully, like sunlight creeping across a still lake. For Van, every visit to Hazelwood Cafe became a chance to forget the weight of wealth and responsibility, if only for a few hours. For Elsie, every shared laugh and meaningful glance became a thread of trust and connection, a sense that someone understood the heart behind her art and her work. And though neither of them said it aloud yet, they both felt the gentle shift, the kind of shift that only comes from shared moments, patience and consistent quiet presence. As the sun disappeared behind the horizon and the first stars began to twinkle, Van offered his arm in a playful, understated gesture. She took it, and they continued walking, shoulders brushing, hearts lighter, the city's soft glow around them. "I'm really glad I came back," he said quietly, not needing her reply. She smiled, feeling the warmth of his words. The warmth of the evening, the warmth that lingered from something far deeper than coffee. "Me too," she said softly. And somewhere between the fading sunlight and the gentle hum of Nashville streets, a simple friendship began to bloom into something far more profound. Affection born not of grandeur or gesture, but of honesty, presence, and the quiet magic of shared hearts. The morning sun filtered softly through the pale curtains of Elsie's apartment, painting the room in gentle gold. The city outside was just waking, its hum of early traffic and distant guitar riffs drifting faintly through the streets. Elsie sipped her tea, sketchpad balanced on her knees, thinking about the day ahead. There was a light knock at her door, soft but deliberate. Before she could answer, It swung open to reveal Van, casually dressed in a soft gray sweater and jeans, his familiar calm smile in place. "Good morning," he said, his voice steady, but there was a subtle earnestness she hadn't heard before. "Morning," she replied, smiling. "Everything okay?" He nodded. "Better than okay. I was hoping you might join me for a drive. Somewhere quiet. Just for a little escape from the city." Her curiosity piqued, she agreed, gathering her scarf and bag. As she followed him to the car, she noticed the quiet deliberateness in his movements, the softness in his gaze, the same kind, attentive presence she had come to cherish over the past weeks. The drive took them out of Nashville, down a winding country road lined with golden autumn trees. The air smelled faintly of earth and dry leaves. Music played softly from the car's stereo, a gentle, acoustic tune that seemed to belong to the morning itself. Eventually, Van turned onto a narrow path leading to a serene countryside property. Rolling hills stretched in every direction, and the light mist rising from the fields gave the landscape a dreamlike quality. Birds called softly in the distance, and a small pond reflected the sky like glass. He parked the car near a rustic wooden fence, and for a moment neither of them spoke. They just stood taking in the tranquility. Finally, Van turned to her, his hands resting gently on the steering wheel. "I wanted to show you this place," he said softly. "It's where I go when I need to think, when I need quiet. It's my refuge." Elsie looked around, taking in the open fields, the serenity, and the subtle beauty of a place untouched by the noise of the city. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He nodded, eyes meeting hers. "There's something I want to tell you, Elsie. Something I should have told you a long time ago. Not to impress you, not to change anything between us, but because you deserve honesty." Her heart fluttered slightly, a mixture of anticipation and gentle apprehension. "Okay," she said softly. He took a deep breath. "My real name is Vance Fletcher," he began. "I'm the owner of Fletcher Investments. I built my company from scratch, and I guess I lost myself along the way. I've spent years buried in work, surrounded by people who only saw what I had, not who I was. And then I met you." Elsie blinked, absorbing the words. Her first instinct wasn't shock or disbelief. It was surprise, gentle, quiet surprise, and an awareness she hadn't expected. "You could have told me earlier," she said, voice soft, "but I think I already knew. Not who you are, but the kind of heart you have." Vance's lips curved into a relieved, tender smile. "You really mean that?" She nodded, returning his gaze steadily. "I do, I see you, Van. Or Vance, I guess. And the rest? It doesn't matter. Not to me, for a moment." The only sound was the soft breeze rustling the leaves and the distant call of a bird. Vance reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You've reminded me what real connection feels like," he said, his voice quiet but full of emotion. Her eyes softened. "And you've reminded me that even the smallest kindness, a cup of coffee, a smile, can change someone's day, or maybe even their life." They stood together in the peaceful morning, letting the moment stretch. The city, the obligations, and the noise of the world felt impossibly far away. All that mattered was the honesty between them, the bond that had grown quietly over shared coffee, laughter, and gentle conversation. Over the next weeks, their relationship deepened in the most natural, unforced ways. They spent mornings together at Hazelwood Cafe, afternoons wandering galleries and parks, evenings sitting on benches under the glow of street lamps, sipping tea and sharing quiet words. Vance surprised her one morning by gently handing her the keys to a small property he had purchased in town, meant to serve as her art studio. She hesitated, shaking her head. "I can't let you do this for me," she said firmly. "You can," he replied softly, "but only if you promise to run it your way. I just want to help you have what you've always dreamed of." Her smile was bright, filled with gratitude, determination, and independence. "I'll do it," she said. "But everything else is mine to decide." And that's exactly what she did. The space became the Wolf Art Studio, a haven for children and artists alike. Vance never interfered with her vision. He simply watched quietly, content to see her joy flourish. The day of the studio's grand opening arrived, and the excitement in the air was palpable. Children's laughter mingled with soft conversations, the scent of paint and fresh paper filling the space. Elsie moved among the visitors, introducing young artists to their tables, guiding little hands over brushes, and encouraging shy smiles. At one point, she looked up and noticed Vance quietly hanging a frame on the wall. Curiosity drew her closer, and her breath caught as she realized what it was. Her original sketch of the man whose card had declined in Hazelwood Cafe, the very drawing she had made in that quiet corner, she had given it to him weeks ago. You framed this?" she asked softly, turning to him. He smiled, calm and tender. "I thought it deserved to be here. Not just because it's beautiful, but because it reminds me of the beginning of everything and of how a small act of kindness can ripple into something greater." Elsie felt warmth spread through her chest. I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything," he replied, his hand brushing gently against hers. "Just feel it." And she did. She felt the quiet, steady current of affection, the gratitude that had grown between them, and the profound joy of knowing someone saw her, truly saw her from the very start. They shared a quiet moment, coffee in hand, as children's laughter echoed around them. The walls of the studio were adorned with art, some hers, some the children's, all vibrant with life. The room was a testament to dreams nurtured, kindness shared, and love quietly blooming. As the Nashville evening settled over the city, the golden light fading into soft purples and deep blues, Elsie and Vance stepped outside to the studio's small wooden steps. The air was crisp but comforting, carrying the faint scent of paint and autumn leaves. Elsie sat down first, letting the quietness settle over her. Vance joined her, settling close, and she instinctively rested her head on his shoulder. He murmured, voice low and gentle, "You paid for my coffee once." Her lips curved into a soft, knowing smile. "And you paid me back with a lifetime." For a long moment they sat together, simply being, the city alive behind them, but the world contained in the quiet warmth of each other's presence. No grand gestures were needed, no external validations. Their love had grown in honesty, patience, and gentle care. Elsie tilted her head slightly, feeling the steady heartbeat beneath her cheek, and whispered, I've always known what this felt like. Even before I met you." Vance's hand found hers, lacing fingers in a simple, perfect gesture. "And I think I finally understand what it means to be seen, to be home." The night deepened, lights twinkling from nearby streets and distant homes, but their focus remained inward, on the shared warmth, on the shared dreams, on the small but profound miracle of two lives, intertwined through kindness and trust. As the stars began to shimmer, Elsie whispered softly, "Sometimes the smallest kindness can pour into a heart big enough to change two lives forever." Vance rested his head lightly against hers, smiling. "And sometimes it only takes one cup of coffee to start it all." The world continued around them, quiet, calm, full of possibility. But in that moment, time itself seemed to pause, holding the peace, the joy, and the love they had built together in its embrace. It wasn't a story of wealth or power, not of scandal or drama. It was a story of hearts opening, of dreams nurtured, of two people finding each other in the simplest, most profound ways. And as they sat together, hands intertwined, Elsie and Vance both knew that this was only the beginning, the start of a life, built on kindness, honesty, and the quiet magic of shared moments. The late afternoon sun bathed Nashville in warm gold, casting long shadows over the quiet streets. The Wolf Art Studio had closed for the day, leaving only the faint echo of children's laughter and the soft scent of paint lingering in the air. Elsie stood on the small wooden steps outside, brushing a stray curl from her face, smiling at the memories of that morning. A gentle car engine rumbled nearby, and she looked up to see Vance approaching, casually elegant in a tailored jacket, but with the same calm, familiar warmth in his eyes. In his hand he carried a small velvet box. "Van?" Elsie asked, curiosity and amusement dancing in her eyes. He stopped in front of her, taking her hands gently in his. "Elsie," he said softly, voice full of quiet reverence, "you've given me more than I ever imagined possible. You've reminded me that life isn't about wealth or status or achievements. It's about moments like this with you." Her breath caught slightly. There was something in his expression, a mix of hope, love, and vulnerability, that made her heart beat faster. Then he knelt right there on the studio steps, the velvet box opening to reveal a stunning diamond ring, simple yet exquisitely elegant. The sunlight caught its facets, scattering tiny rainbows across her hands. "Elsie Wolf," he said, his voice steady but trembling slightly with emotion. "You paid for my coffee once, not knowing who I was. But in that moment, you gave me something priceless, your kindness. Since then, every day with you has been a gift. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Tears welled in Elsie's eyes, a mixture of joy, love, and disbelief at the perfection of the moment. She looked down at him, taking a steadying breath. Yes, she whispered, her voice bright with emotion. 1,000 times yes. He smiled, slipping the ring onto her finger with careful reverence. It fit perfectly, sparkling like the start of their shared future. He rose, wrapping her in a warm embrace as she laughed, the sound mingling with the soft evening breeze and the fading golden light. For a long moment they simply held each other, letting the world fall away. The city, the streets, the people, none of it mattered. There was only the warmth between them, the quiet certainty that they had found home in each other. Vance pulled back just enough to hold her face in his hands, brushing a tear from her cheek. You've changed me, he murmured, more than coffee, more than kindness, more than I ever thought possible. And you've changed me, Elsie replied softly, her hand resting over his heart. You've shown me that love doesn't need grand gestures. It needs honesty, presence, and care. That's enough, more than enough. They laughed softly together, a quiet, joyous sound that filled the studio steps and the golden evening beyond. Around them, the world seemed to shimmer, bathed in the glow of sunset and hope. As they watched the first stars appear in the sky above Nashville, Elsie rested her head on Vance's shoulder once more. He kissed her hair lightly, whispering, "From a cup of coffee to a lifetime. This is our beginning." She smiled against him, her eyes shining. A beginning I never want to end. And in that simple, perfect moment, with the diamond ring catching the light in hearts, full of gratitude, love, and laughter, two lives were forever changed. The world had given them coffee, kindness, and a chance encounter. They had given each other everything else. Thank you for being part of Whispers of Hope. Your love and support mean more than words. Together we're spreading light, one whisper at a time.